Commander Vorath Keln stood at the observation window of the Galactic Union diplomatic station and watched the human transport ship approach. His compound eyes tracked its movement with the precision of a predator, though he felt no threat from the small vessel. How could he? The humans were new to the galaxy. They were soft. Everyone knew this. Vorath was not soft. His dark carapace carried the scars of 3 interstellar wars. Plasma burns marked his left side where a Draven soldier had almost killed him 20 years ago. His right arm had been regrown twice after combat injuries. The crimson spiral medal hung in his quarters, given to him by the Selvari High Command for killing an enemy general with his bare claws. He had seen fleets burn. He had walked through the ruins of conquered cities. He had ordered bombardments that turned green worlds into ash. Nothing in the galaxy could shake him anymore. He was certain of this. The assignment to serve as military liaison to the human diplomatic delegation was supposed to be easy. A reward, really. After 40 years of war, the High Command wanted to give their decorated hero something simple. The humans had only made first contact with the galactic community 2 centuries ago. They had no great military history. They had fought some pirates, defended a few colonies. Nothing serious. Vorath had accepted the assignment without much thought. It would be interesting to study these strange creatures up close. They were odd-looking things. No armor, no claws, no venom. Their skin was soft and easily damaged. They came from a comfortable world with gentle weather. How they had survived long enough to reach the stars was a mystery to many species. The transport docked, and Vorath made his way to the greeting hall. His heavy footsteps echoed on the metal floor. Other species moved out of his way when they saw him coming. This was proper. He was Selvari. He was a warrior. The human delegation came through the airlock in small groups. They wore simple uniforms in dark colors. Their faces showed something Vorath had learned was called smiling. They pulled back their lips to show their teeth. In most species, showing teeth was a threat. Humans did it to show friendship. It was strange, but Vorath had studied enough to know this. His counterpart was waiting for him near the front of the group. Colonel Diana Okonkwo was a small woman by human standards. Her hair had turned gray with age. Her skin was dark brown, and her eyes were calm and steady. She moved without hurry, without fear. Vorath noticed something about her immediately. She carried herself like a soldier. Not like the young officers who had never seen battle, but like someone who had. There was a weight in her eyes that he recognized. He had seen it in his own reflection. "Commander Vorath Keln," she said, extending her hand. "It is an honor to meet you. I have read about your service record. You are highly respected among your people." Vorath took her small hand carefully. Humans were fragile. He did not want to break her fingers by accident. "Colonel Okonkwo, welcome to the station. I hope your journey was comfortable." "It was, thank you." She smiled again with those strange flat teeth. "I look forward to working with you. The Cultural Exchange Summit next month will be an important event for our species." Vorath nodded. The summit was the reason for this delegation. Every species in the Galactic Union would present their history and culture. It was meant to build understanding and trust. The Selvari would show their 3 great wars and the building of their empire. They would demonstrate their strength. "I would be happy to help you prepare your presentation," Vorath offered. "I imagine human military history is rather limited, but I'm sure we can find ways to make it interesting." Something changed in Diana's face. It was small, just a tiny shift around her eyes. Not offense, something else. Something older and heavier. For just a moment, Vorath felt like he was looking at a soldier who had seen things she could not forget. Then the moment passed, and she was calm again. "That is kind of you, Commander. I will send you our historical files tonight. You can review them at your convenience. I look forward to it. I expect I can finish them quickly. Then we can discuss how to present them." Diana nodded slowly. "Yes, though I should warn you, Commander. You may want to read them in private. And perhaps take your time." Vorath did not understand what she meant. Human history was short. What could possibly require special warning? The first week passed smoothly. Vorath helped the human delegation settle into their quarters. He introduced them to other species on the station. He answered their questions about Selvari culture and customs. They were polite and curious, always asking questions, always taking notes. Diana was a good counterpart. She was organized and efficient. She did not waste time with foolish talk. When she spoke, she meant what she said. Vorath found himself respecting her, even though she was human. On the 7th night, he finally sat down to review the historical files she had sent. He opened his reading screen in his private quarters, settled into his rest cradle, and began. He expected to finish within an hour, maybe 2. Human civilization was young. How much history could they possibly have? The first file was labeled Introduction to Human Conflict. Vorath opened it and began to read. The introduction mentioned that humans had fought among themselves throughout their entire history. This was not unusual. Most species had internal conflicts before they united. The Selvari had their clan wars thousands of years ago. Then the file listed a number. It was the estimated total of humans killed by other humans throughout their recorded history. Vorath read the number 3 times. He was sure it was a translation error. It had to be. The number was too large. It would mean that humans had killed more of their own kind than the total population of most galactic species. He checked the translation. It was correct. Vorath sat very still for a long moment. Then he opened the next file. It was labeled World War I. He began to read. By midnight, he was still reading. His rest cradle lay empty. His meal sat untouched on the table. The lights in his quarters had dimmed automatically, but he did not notice. His compound eyes were fixed on the screen, and his scarred claws gripped the edges of his chair. He had been wrong about the humans. He had been very, very wrong. The Cultural Exchange Summit brought representatives from 47 species to the Great Hall of the Galactic Union Station. Vorath stood near the back, watching the crowd with careful eyes. The hall was magnificent. Crystal pillars rose toward a domed ceiling that showed the stars outside. Floating platforms carried delegates to their assigned sections. The air hummed with translation devices working to convert dozens of languages. The Selvari delegation went first. Their presentation was impressive. Holographic images showed the 3 great wars that forged their empire. Brave soldiers fought against terrible enemies. Victories were celebrated. The audience watched with appropriate respect. This was the story of a warrior species, and they told it with pride. Other species followed. The Thren showed their artistic achievements. Sculptures and paintings that had taken centuries to create. Music that used frequencies most species could not hear. The Mojave displayed their technological marvels. Ships that could cross galaxies. Machines that could rebuild damaged worlds. The Veleth presented their spiritual traditions. Rituals that connected them to what they called the universal flow. Each presentation showed strength, achievement, beauty, the best of what each species had to offer. Then it was humanity's turn. Colonel Diana Okonkwo walked to the central platform alone. She wore her formal uniform, simple and dark. She carried no notes. The platform lifted her until she floated above the crowd, visible to all. Distinguished representatives of the Galactic Union, she began. Her voice was calm and clear. Humanity thanks you for this opportunity to share our history. We ask for your patience. What we are about to show you may be difficult to witness. Whispers spread through the crowd. Vorath felt his stomach tighten. He had read the files. He knew what was coming. The holographic display activated. The first image showed soldiers in a muddy trench. Their faces were hollow and exhausted. Their uniforms were torn and filthy. Behind them, the ground was covered with bodies. "This is called World War I," Diana said. "It happened on our home planet approximately 400 years ago. It lasted 4 years. 17 million of our people died." The numbers appeared on the display. A sound moved through the crowd. Confusion. Disbelief. The war was fought primarily in ditches cut into the earth. Soldiers faced each other across small distances. They used weapons that could kill hundreds in minutes. They used poison gas that destroyed lungs and eyes. Many drowned in mud. The images changed. Photographs of gas attacks. Men with burned faces. Mass graves stretching to the horizon. A delegate from the Thren species stood and left the hall. Her face was pale purple with distress. Diana continued without pause. 21 years later, humanity fought again. This second conflict is called World War II. Between 60 and 80 million died. The number hung in the air. Several delegates made sounds of shock. Vorath saw the Mojave ambassador turn to whisper urgently to an aide. During this war, certain groups within humanity attempted to eliminate entire populations of their own species. This is called genocide. The display showed the camps, the trains, the systematic horror of industrial murder. This was not the first genocide in human history. It was not the last. Diana's voice remained steady, but Vorath could see the effort it cost her. She was not reading from a script. She was remembering. Humanity has committed atrocities throughout our history. We have enslaved millions. We have conquered and destroyed cultures. We have developed weapons capable of ending all life on our planet. Images of mushroom clouds filled the display. The burning shadows of vaporized cities. We pointed these weapons at each other for decades. We came close to destroying ourselves multiple times. The hall was silent now. No whispers. No movement. Every eye was fixed on the small human woman floating above them. Diana paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less clear. This is what we were. This is what we remain capable of. We do not share this to frighten you, but because you deserve to know who you are allying with. The display changed. New images appeared. Hands reaching across battle lines. Former enemies working together to rebuild cities. Courts where those who committed atrocities were judged by law rather than vengeance. After each horror, humanity chose to remember. We built memorials to our victims. We taught our children what we had done. We wrote laws to prevent ourselves from repeating our worst acts. We created systems to hold ourselves accountable. The images showed museums, monuments, schools where children learned about genocide and war. We are not proud of our past, but we are not ashamed to face it. Every human child learns this history. Every human soldier swears oaths written in response to our failures. We did these things. We do not pretend otherwise. Diana looked out at the crowd of alien faces. Vorath could see the weight she carried. The weight of her entire species' memory. We offer you this truth as a foundation. If you choose to walk beside us, you will walk beside a species that has looked into its own darkness and chosen, every single day, to reach for something better. We have not always succeeded, but we have never stopped trying. The display faded. Diana lowered her hands. This is who we are. We ask not for your trust, but for your understanding. The rest we will earn. She stepped down from the platform and returned to her seat. The hall remained silent for a long moment. Vorath watched the other delegations. He saw fear on many faces, horror on others. But he also saw something else on some of them. Something that looked like respect. The Silvery ambassador leaned toward Vorath. "What is your assessment, Commander? Are these creatures a threat?" Vorath considered the question carefully. He thought about everything he had read, everything he had seen, everything Diana had just revealed. "They are not a threat, Ambassador," he said finally. "They are a warning, and perhaps a hope." The ambassador looked confused, but Vorath understood now. He finally understood. The file called World War I described a conflict that lasted 4 years. Just 4 years. On a single planet. Vorath had fought in wars that lasted longer than that. But this was different. 17 million dead. The number sat on his screen like a wound. 17 million sentient beings killed in a war between humans. Not humans against aliens. Not humans against monsters. Humans against other humans who looked almost exactly like them. Vorath read about the trenches. Long ditches cut into the earth, stretching across entire continents. Soldiers lived in these trenches for months. They lived in mud and water and filth. They ate beside the bodies of their dead friends. Rats ate the corpses. Disease spread through the lines. He read about the first day of something called the Battle of the Somme. In one single day, one army lost nearly 60,000 soldiers. 60,000. Dead or wounded between sunrise and sunset. And the battle continued for months after that. Over 1 million total casualties. For a few miles of ground, Vorath had commanded soldiers. He had sent them to die. This was the nature of war. But the scale of this was beyond anything he had experienced. The Salvary would never spend so many lives for so little gain. It was wasteful. It was madness. Then he read about the gas. Humans had created poison that floated through the air. It burned the lungs. It melted the eyes. Soldiers drowned in their own fluids as their bodies turned against them. The descriptions were medical and detailed. Vorath felt his stomach turn. He told himself, this must be exceptional. This must be the worst of human history. An anomaly. A moment of madness that they learned from and never repeated. He opened the next file. It was labeled World War II. The file began with a simple statement. This conflict happened only 21 years after the first one ended. The same generation that survived the first war sent their children into the second one. Vorath read slowly now. His hands were not steady. 60 to 80 million dead. The number was so large, it almost lost meaning. But the files would not let him look away from what it meant. There were photographs. There were documents. Humans kept very good records of what they did to each other. He learned about camps. Not military camps. These were places built specifically to kill people. Not enemy soldiers. Civilians. Men, women, children. They were brought to these camps on trains. Their heads were shaved. Numbers were marked on their skin. Then they were killed. Efficiently. Systematically. In enormous numbers. The files used a word Vorath had never seen before. Genocide. The deliberate destruction of an entire group of people. He learned that this was not a new concept. Humans had done this many times throughout their history. They had names for different genocides. There were lists. He read about cities destroyed in single moments. Weapons that split atoms and released the fire of stars. 2 cities. Hundreds of thousands of civilians dead in flashes of light. The survivors were burned by invisible poison that killed them slowly over years. Vorath stood up from his chair. He walked to his window and looked out at the stars. His reflection stared back at him. He looked old. He looked tired. The Salvary's bloodiest war was called the Keth Campaign. It lasted 12 years and spread across 3 star systems. 4 million soldiers died. It was considered a tragedy. Poets wrote about it. Monuments were built. The Salvary swore they would never again pay such a terrible price. Humans had exceeded that number in single battles, multiple times, and they did it with technology that could barely reach their own moon. He returned to his reading. The files did not stop with the two world wars. There was more. So much more. He read about something called the Mongol conquests. Armies on animals swept across continents. Entire cities were destroyed. The population of Earth actually decreased during this period. Humans killed so many humans that there were fewer of them when it ended. He read about slavery. Millions of humans captured and transported across oceans. Treated as property. Worked to death. Bred like animals. This continued for centuries. He read about colonial empires. Stronger human nations conquered weaker ones. They took everything, land, resources, people. They drew lines on maps and created countries that made no sense. The chaos from those lines was still causing problems. When humans finally reached the stars, he read about a place called Rwanda. In 100 days, humans killed between 500,000 and 1 million of their neighbors. They used simple tools, machetes, clubs. They knew their victims. They had lived beside them. They killed them anyway. Vorath closed the file. He could not read any more. Not tonight. He walked to his personal shrine, where he kept his medals and honors. The crimson spiral gleamed in the low light. He had earned it for killing efficiently. For being good at war. He had thought he understood what that meant. He looked at his own scarred claws. In 40 years of warfare, he had personally killed perhaps 200 enemy soldiers. He was considered exceptional. A hero. Humans had individuals in their history who had ordered the deaths of millions. Some of them were still celebrated. Some of them had monuments. What kind of species was this? What kind of creatures could do these things to each other and still function? Still build civilizations? Still reach for the stars? He did not sleep that night. He lay in his rest cradle and stared at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the photographs from the files. Mass graves, burning cities, children with hollow eyes. The humans on the station seemed so normal, so friendly. They smiled and asked polite questions. They talked about art and food and their families back home. But somewhere in their history, in their blood, in their memory, there was this. All of this dawned as the station's artificial dawn began to glow through his window. Vorath made a decision. He needed to understand. He could not work beside these creatures without knowing what they truly were. He opened the files again and continued reading. For the next 10 days, Vorath read human history with the focus of a soldier studying an enemy. He barely slept. He ate only when his body demanded it. His duty suffered, but he did not care. He needed to understand. He read about the torture devices. Humans had invented machines designed to cause maximum pain without killing quickly. They gave these machines names. They used them on each other for centuries. Sometimes for information. Sometimes for punishment. Sometimes for entertainment. He read about child soldiers. Children trained to kill. Children sent into battle. This happened throughout human history and was still happening. When humans finally stopped fighting among themselves, he read about weapons that spread disease. Blankets given as gifts that carried sickness. Walls poisoned. Plague used as a tool of war. He read about the nuclear arsenals. After using atomic weapons twice, humans did not stop making them. They made more. Many more. At one point, they had enough nuclear weapons to destroy their entire planet several times over. Different groups of humans pointed these weapons at each other for decades. The entire species lived under the threat of total extinction by their own hands. Vorath put down his reading screen and walked to his window. His reflection looked like a stranger, thin, exhausted, haunted. The Selvari had done terrible things in their wars. He knew this. He had participated in some of them, but there had always been logic. There had always been purpose. Conquer territory. Gain resources. Eliminate threats. The violence served goals. Human violence often served nothing. It was chaos. It was hatred given form. It was darkness that fed on itself. And yet, Varth had noticed something strange in the files. Something that did not fit. Humans did not hide their history. They did not bury it or forget it. They taught it to their children. Every human child learned about the wars, the genocides, the slavery. They were shown the photographs. They were told the stories. They were made to remember. Humans built monuments to their victims. Not just their own dead soldiers, but the people they had killed. There were museums dedicated to remembering atrocities. Former enemies built these museums together. Humans created laws, specifically designed to stop themselves from repeating their worst acts. International courts. War crime tribunals. Rules for how wars could be fought. These rules were often broken, but they existed. Humans tried to cage their own violence. Vorath had never seen anything like this. The Selvari did not discuss their shameful moments. They certainly did not teach them to their children. The past was the past. Victory was what mattered, but humans seemed to believe that forgetting was dangerous. That memory was a kind of medicine. That looking at their own darkness was necessary to fight it. He requested a private meeting with Colonel OKONKW. She came to his quarters the next evening. She looked at his face and said nothing about his obvious exhaustion. She simply sat in the chair he offered and waited. "I have finished reading your files," Vorath said. His voice was rough from days of silence. "I thought you might have. You have been absent from several meetings." "Yes." He paused. He did not know how to ask what he wanted to ask. "How do you live with this?" Diana's expression did not change. "What do you mean? How does your species function? How do you build cities and raise families and travel to the stars when you know what you are capable of? How do you look at your own children knowing that they carry this capacity for darkness?" Diana was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "We remember," she said. "We force ourselves to remember, especially when it hurts. Because the moment we forget what we can become, we risk becoming it again. And does it work? Does remembering stop the violence? Not always. Not perfectly." She looked at her hands. They were small and soft, but Vorath now knew what human hands could do. "We are still fighting that battle, Commander. We probably always will be. Every generation has to choose again. Every person has to decide what kind of human they want to be." Vorath stood and walked to his window. The stars were cold and distant. "The other species think you are soft," he said. "They see your small bodies and your gentle world, and they assume you are weak. They do not know. No, they do not. But you came here anyway. You joined the Galactic Union knowing that everyone would underestimate you. We did." Vorath turned to face her. "Why? Why reveal this history at the summit? You could hide it. You could present only your art and your science and your exploration. No one would know." Diana met his compound eyes without flinching. "Because we are tired of hiding, Commander. Because if we are going to be part of this community, we want to be honest about who we are. And because any species that allies with us deserves to know what they are allying with." Vorath felt something shift in his understanding. He had thought of humans as creatures who had done terrible things. But that was not quite right. Humans were creatures who had done terrible things and then chosen to face those things openly. They had not conquered their darkness. They had learned to live with it, to fight it, to warn others about it. "Your civilization," he said slowly, "is not built despite your violence. It is built to contain it. Diana nodded. Every law, every institution, every treaty, all of it is scaffolding, Commander. A structure we build and rebuild to keep ourselves from falling into the abyss. We know the abyss is there. We have seen it. We remember what it looks like. And you think we should know this. I think you need to know this. Before we fight beside you. Before we call you allies. She stood and walked toward the door. Then she paused and looked back. We are not asking for trust, Commander. We are asking for understanding. The rest we will earn. She left him alone with his thoughts. Varath sat in silence for a long time. Then he began to write his report for the Sylvari High Command. They needed to know what the humans really were. The weeks after the summit changed everything. The human presentation had sent shockwaves through the Galactic Union. Some species requested urgent private meetings with humanity's diplomats. They wanted to understand more. They wanted to know how humans had survived themselves. Other species kept their distance. The Velith recalled their ambassador for consultation. The Thren issued a formal statement expressing concern about humanity's admission to the Union. Fear spread through the diplomatic channels like ripples in water. But something else spread. 2. Respect. The Mojave, whose empire had fought its own bloody civil war centuries ago, sent a message of solidarity. The Keth, a species known for their strict warrior codes, requested military exchanges with human forces. They wanted to learn how humans train their soldiers to follow rules even in the chaos of battle. Vorath watched all of this from his position as liaison. He attended meetings. He answered questions. He tried to explain what he had learned, though he was not sure he fully understood it himself. 3 weeks after the summit, he found Diana on the observation deck. She stood alone, watching ships come and go from the station. The light from distant stars painted patterns on her face. "Colonel," he said, approaching slowly. "May I join you?" She nodded without turning. "Of course, Commander." They stood together in comfortable silence. Varath had spent 40 years with soldiers. He knew how to share space without needing words. Finally, he spoke. "I have been a soldier for 40 years. I have killed. I have ordered others to kill. I have watched worlds burn and called it victory. I thought I understood war." Diana turned to look at him. Her eyes were calm and patient. "Your species frightens me, Colonel. Not because of what you did. My people have committed our share of horrors. We do not speak of them often, but they are there in our history." He paused, searching for the right words. "What frightens me is that you remember. You choose to carry that weight rather than set it down." Diana nodded slowly. "Some call it guilt. Some call it wisdom. I think it is just human. The other species think you revealed your history as a warning. A display of power." Vorath gestured toward the window, toward the stars where the Draven Collective was massing for war. Everyone knew conflict was coming. They believed you were saying, "Look what we can do. Fear us. And you? What do you think we were saying?" Vorath considered the question. He had thought about it for weeks. He had written 3 different reports to his high command, each one trying to capture what he had learned. "I think it was a promise," he said finally. "You were telling us, we know what we are. We will fight it. And if we begin to slip, we ask you to remind us." Diana's expression changed. Surprise flickered across her face, followed by something warmer. Something that looked like gratitude. "That is the most accurate reading anyone has given," she said quietly. "Most species hear only the threat. They miss the plea. It is both, I think. That is what makes it powerful." Vorath looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Draven were building their fleet. War was coming to the galaxy once again. You are both the warning and the hope. You have shown us what darkness lives in all of us, and you have shown us that it can be fought." Diana was silent for a moment. We did not know if anyone would understand. Some on Earth argued against revealing our history. They said it would only make us enemies. "It has made you some enemies," Varth admitted. "But it has also made you something else. Something more valuable." He turned to face her fully. "When the war comes, I want to fight beside humans." Diana raised an eyebrow. "Even knowing what we are? Especially knowing what you are." Varth placed his scarred claw on the window, looking at his reflection beside hers. "Any species can be dangerous when pushed. The Selvari are dangerous. The Draven are dangerous. Danger is common in this galaxy, but your kind chose to build cages for your own monsters. You built them knowing the monsters would always be there. And then you handed the keys to your children and said, 'Watch the cages. Remember why they are there.'" He lowered his claw and turned back to Diana. "That takes a different kind of strength. Not the strength of warriors who have never faced themselves. The strength of those who have looked in the mirror and kept fighting anyway." Diana studied him with those calm, steady eyes. Vorith wondered what she saw. A scarred old soldier. An alien trying to understand something beyond his experience. A potential ally. "The war with the Draven will be bad," she said. "Our analysts believe it will last at least a decade. Many will die. Yes, humans will be in the front lines. We have already committed our forces. When the killing starts, you will see what we are capable of. The darkness will come out. It always does in war, I know." Morath extended his scarred limb in the human gesture of respect. It felt awkward and strange, but also right. "And that is why I want to stand beside you. Not because you are perfect, but because you are honest. You know your own darkness, and you fight it even as you fight the enemy. That is something worth respecting." Diana looked at his extended claw. Then she took it in her small, soft hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "The Selvari became strong by conquering others," Vorith said. "Humanity became strong by conquering themselves. That is a war that never ends. You fight it every generation. Every day." "Yes," Diana said. "We do. It would be an honor, Colonel, to stand beside a species still brave enough to look in the mirror." Diana's grip tightened. Her smile was small but genuine. "Welcome to the team, Commander." They stood together at the window, human and alien, watching the stars. Out there, enemies were gathering. War was coming. Death was coming, but something else was coming too. Something that might, just might, be worth fighting for. A species that had seen its own worst nature and chosen to keep reaching for something better. Not because they were naturally good, but because they remembered what happened when they were not. Varth finally understood what made humans dangerous. It was not their capacity for violence. Many species had that. It was their capacity for memory, their refusal to forget, their stubborn, painful insistence on looking at what they had done and learning from it. The war would be terrible. He knew this. He had seen enough war to know what was coming. But for the first time in 40 years, Vorith felt something that surprised him. He felt hope.